Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first ACAT seminar for 2026. So my name is Carl Huang, and I will be facilitating the seminar today. I would like to start by acknowledging the Whadjuk Noongar people as the traditional custodians of the land on which our campus is located, their continued connections to country, and pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. So we are really pleased to have Dr. Hao Zhang here giving us the presentation. The presentation is titled From Naked Resignations to Influencer Entrepreneurship, Chinese Women's Digital Nomadism in Southeast Asia. Now, just to give you a quick background on Hao, Dr. Hao Zhang is a research fellow at the Influencer Ethnography Research Lab at Curtin University. Hao obtained her PhD from Deakin University after graduation from the University of Melbourne with first-class honors. Hao is a Chinese queer female researcher with expertise in sociology, cultural studies, and media studies. Her work focuses on gender and sexuality, transnational mobility, and digital cultures. Hao's doctoral research explored the experiences of Chinese queer female students in Australia, examining how they craft their queer and adult identities in a transnational context. Hao's research has been published in the Sociological Review, Journal of Homosexuality, and International Journal of Cultural Studies. Hao is a reviewer for a number of journals. She has also held editorial roles, including editor of Routledge edited volume and handbooks, as well as guest editor for a special issue of Inter-Asia Cultural Studies. Now, before I hand over to Hao, just some very quick housekeeping. So as I mentioned, today's seminar is going to be recorded and it is online only. So to make sure everything runs smoothly, please keep your mics and cameras off while the presentation is happening. We will have a Q&A afterwards, so you can save all your questions for afterwards. And you can also use the chat to type in your questions as well, and we'll come back to the questions after the presentation, if that works better. So without further waiting, I'm going to hand over now to Hao.
Thank you so much, Carl. If I knew you were going to read my bio out, I will probably give you a shorter version. This is definitely too long. So good day, everyone, and thank you so much for coming along to my ACAT talk over lunch. It's really lovely to see so many familiar names or hopefully faces later after the break. I hope you all have a really restful and relaxing summer. So for those I haven't met yet, and who knows, maybe you're watching the recording. Hi, I'm Hao. I'm a research fellow here with the Influencer Ethnography Research Lab, IER Lab. Thank you so much, Carl, for the invitation, and to Linda and Tamika for coordinating everything so smoothly. I really appreciate it. I'm very glad to have the chance to share where this work is up to at this moment, and also just as importantly, to hear your thoughts on it. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the unceded land on which I'm locating today, the Wurundjeri Wurrung peoples. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians and the lands on which Curtin University Bentley campus, where I work, is located, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. I pay my respects to elders past and present, and to the young people who are learning and sharing their culture with us. A quick note up front, I'm joining remotely today because I'm currently in the middle of fieldwork and with a fairly tight travel schedule. I'm really sorry I can't be on campus in person, but I'm grateful that we can still make this work online, and I will keep things hopefully conversational so we can have a good discussion at the end. So since starting my role at the IER Lab, I've been exploring how influencer cultures shape identity and mobility, and how identity and mobility in turn contribute to influencer cultures. Before I get into today's talk, I want to briefly situate this project within my broader research program, Digital Margins at IER Lab, because the threads definitely connect. First, I have a project on influencers and queer coupling, where I look at how influencers' queer intimate relationships are made visible online and how these relationships shape wider dating cultures, particularly global interracial dating imaginaries, and also like the rainbow family, queer family making aspirations. Second, I'm working on the politics of Chinese race and ethnicities in influencer cultures. This project thinks about Chineseness as an inclusive and expansive identity, one that includes influences across the Chinese diaspora and Sinophone cultures. I'm especially interested in how this identity politics play out in the global South and across the Asia Pacific. Third, I'm dedicated to exploring Wanghong advocacy on Xiaohongshu. Here, I examine Xiaohongshu's potential and its limits, of course, as a platform where Wanghong can advocate for marginalized communities and amplify fringe and subcultural causes. We're also navigating their commercial and platform constraints and opportunities. The project I'm presenting today sits most directly in that third stream, but it also draws on the first two, because questions of gender, intimacy, race, and mobility keep resurfacing in how influencers build audiences, craft identities, and move through different cultural and geopolitical contexts. So today, I'm excited to share an early stage project on Chinese women's digital nomadism in Southeast Asia. This project looks at the intersection of personal identity and global movement in the context of social media entrepreneurship, asking how influencers shaping the discourse of this kind of new form of self and aspirations for women, especially young women, on the move. A bit of context and overview. Since China reopened after the COVID-19 pandemic in 2022, there has been a surge of 裸辞 content on Chinese social media platforms, particularly Xiaohongshu, and maybe some of you might know this platform as Red Notes. So the Chinese term 裸辞, which can be translated as naked resignation, means voluntary departures from stable, high-profile corporate roles without another similar job lined up. This wave of content made me ask, why do these creators draw so much attention and so many followers after 2022? This phenomenon taps into broader youth discontent in China today, an urge to escape intense work pressures and definitely living pressures and find self-fulfillment abroad, somewhere else. It echoes trending youth discourses like lying flat, 躺平, and even like the 润学, the desire to run somewhere else, reflecting a generation kind of like questioning conventional career path and the traditional life course or youth transitions pattern. Among all this, what I'm especially interested in is the pivot process, how these former corporate workers become influencer entrepreneurs and how that transition is narrated and as well as monetized through travel and everyday life across Southeast Asia. In practice, many of them take up what we might call digital nomadism, not simply as working remotely while traveling, but as socially legible way of living this corporate life while still presenting themselves as productive, ambitious, and future success-oriented. In other words, it becomes a bridge, a way to step away from the office without stepping away from success as an identity. On Xiaohongshu, I've noticed that high-achieving women with big tech or major corporate backgrounds are particularly visible in this space. They've become key voices shaping how naked resignation is understood and desired and sometimes executed. They've become key voices shaping how these roles, formal roles, often with the recognizable corporate aesthetics, alongside reflections on why they quit, what they learned, and what their daily routines look like now after their quitting. And importantly, these posts don't just document a lifestyle. They work as a public self-presentation or promotion. They signal credibility, they build trust, and they help cultivate an audience of people who are very curious about or actively yearning for a similar career break or reinvention of self. So the question I'm working towards is, why does this particular figure, former corporate women who quit and become more mobile influencer entrepreneurs, carry so much affective and aspirational weight on this platform? And relatedly, what kinds of gendered ideals of freedom, well-being, and this making it ideal image are being reproduced and produced again and again through these narratives of mobility? In this paper, I look at digital nomadism and influencer entrepreneurship through a gender lens by focusing on identity making and transnational mobility. So this is, as I said, an early stage work, more like a proposal. So I would genuinely welcome your thoughts and comments and questions, especially on how to sharpen the research question and where you think the most interesting analytical leverage might be. Okay. To set the scene, I want to tell you a joke that went viral earlier last year on the Chinese internet, as it captures the complicated attachment many young Chinese people have to global mobility. So in a comedy TV show, stand-up comedian Zhang Jun shared that he would soon start a master's at Columbia Universities in the United States. He went for the degree mainly because he loves New York City. After hearing about Jin's longing for NYC, a white friend asked him, "Okay, since you love New York so much, why don't you just live there as a traveler for some time?" And Jin responded, "Because I'm Chinese, I can't just travel for fun. If I go purely for fun, I'll feel guilty. Being too happy brings bad luck." For many Chinese, mobility, especially extended time overseas, needs a purpose beyond leisure. Previously, education and employment were the usual reasons for a sojourn. But building on this cultural context, digital nomadism somehow becomes a nuanced but reasonable form of transnational mobility for Chinese young people who don't want to work and study. It offers a purpose-driven escape. Travel is justified through remote work, self-improvement, or content creation, rather than just perceived as indulgent play and joy. This sentiment is rooted in the idea that any long-term travel must be productive. As Zhang Jun's joke implies, enjoyment must be earned, a mindset that can make just travel feels very transgressive. In this light, the digital nomad lifestyle provides a socially acceptable outlet for wanderlust, framed as work on the move. The term digital nomad was firstly introduced in 1997 by Tsukio Mokimoto and David Manas, to describe how technology and our urge to travel could let people live and work on the move. Today, we are seeing this vision materialized on a larger scale. The number of digital nomads worldwide has sharply risen, especially post-pandemic when remote work became mainstream and more acceptable. In the literature, digital nomadism and what I call its cousin, the more widely studied backpacking, are often tied to Western supremacy in tourism and mobility. We are led to consider the hierarchies in global mobility, such as powerful passports, geographic attributes, and language proficiency. Unlike backpackers, digital nomads emphasize more on work. They seek productivity even in leisure. Indeed, scholars define digital nomads as internet-enabled remote workers who maintain a focus on connectivity and productivity even during travel leisure time. This focus on work sets them apart from traditional tourists. At the same time, as Nicola Bozzi argues, the digital nomad has become a cultural avatar of contemporary neoliberalism, celebrating a depoliticized aesthetics of work in exotic locales. However, there's still a gap there in studying Chinese digital nomads, particularly those with global mobility whose paths overlap with Western nomads in places like Bali and Chiang Mai. Before delving into the case study, remember the other keyword in this study, naked resignation, 裸辞. You might be wondering, after quitting their the previous corporate jobs, what do these young Chinese travelers actually do for work as digital nomads? The answer is many pivot into influencer entrepreneurship, building a personal brand and positioning themselves as key opinion leaders, KOLs, within these digital nomad circles and among audience who dream of quitting their jobs and starting a new chapter of life. In fact, the influencer economy is booming, as many of you in this room will know. According to Influencer Marketing Hub's 2025 report, influencer marketing is projected to reach around 267 billion globally by the end of 2025, so maybe more now. This lucrative promise draws many into trying to monetize their dream life. But let's also look at some recent headlines about resignation influencers in Chinese media. As this community has expanded, breaking through has become much, much harder. Not everyone can simply just be an influencer as a digital nomad. The market is very saturated, algorithms are opaque, and success requires relentless content production, self-promotion, and cross-platform coordination. In short, the labor required here to become a resignation influencers is very competitive, time intense, and precarious. At the same time, many naked resignation influencers project an image of freedom, well-being, and self-growth. The grind is rebranded as a way of self-actualization, obscuring these structural pressures that organize this work. In effect, the labor of maintaining an influencer lifestyle is made invisible behind a curated facade of permanent vacation, holiday, and personal empowerment. Let's move to the theoretical framework. I'm taking an explicitly gendered lens here at this point. What I'm seeing in Chinese women's naked resignation influencer narratives is very recognizable storyline. Nomadic life is framed as self-care, agency, and finding myself. In other words, it's not just like, I quit. It's more about, I chose myself. I prioritize myself. It's like, I claim my time, my body, my well-being. And it's often told as a kind of reset after huge burnout because of corporate pressures. At the same time, these stories echo what feminists and media scholars describe as post-feminist sensibilities, where empowerment is narrated primarily through personal choice and individual transformation. So the central figure here becomes the post-feminist heroine. She leaves the rat race, reinvents herself, invests herself, and comes back stronger. This links closely to the idea of the neoliberal entrepreneur self as well, the subject who is understood to be fully responsible for their own success or failures. And that's where post-feminism and neoliberalism align, both emphasize choice, ambition, self-management, and individual enterprise. Empowerment becomes an individual project, and it can be a long-term project, often tied to self-improvement, lifestyle, and consumption. So yes, these creators often celebrate resisting gender stigma around age, like the leftover women, being single, being too independent, or not fitting a conventional timeline for reproduction and family making. They emphasize resilience, self-reliance, and definitely well-being. But crucially, the escape narrative doesn't reject achievement. It often repackages achievement. Even when the story is framed as anti-corporate, the entrepreneur ideal is still at the center stage. Leaving a stable job is narrated as a courageous individual risk for personal growth, and that success is measured through visibility, influence, and monetization. So the break from corporate life can become a pivot into another kind of high-performance subjectivity, just on platforms rather than in the office. This is where Dr. Jia Guo's work is really helpful for me. Dr. Jia Guo, who is also a dear friend with our IR lab, just published her first monograph, Post-Feminism in China, The Glow Girl, Aesthetic Labor and Social Media, a few days ago. So I'm just really fortunate to catch this work before this presentation. Her book puts about this sharply. She said, the promise of flexible and autonomous work can mask the precarious nature of the internet celebrity industry. And building on critiques like McRobbie, Guo also points out how post-feminist entrepreneurship can distance young women from thinking in terms of labor and exploitation, even while gender and class inequalities deepen. The industry offers what calls a fantasy of self-determination and future prosperity. And finally, I want to name the labor that sits underneath the dream life aesthetic. Building and maintaining an influencer entrepreneur persona involves substantial emotional and aesthetic work. It's the constant performance of being upbeat, relatable, inspiring, even when things are messy behind the scenes. And it's also the strategic styling of the body, the setting, the lifestyle, turning appearance, or even just a very simple photo into the atmosphere, into something that you can use for monetization. So when we read these narratives as self-care and freedom, I think we also need to hold on to the labor question. How is that work gendered, platformed, and sold back to audiences only as aspiration? We also need to acknowledge that all these concepts must be explored with acute cultural sensitivity. In a society that praises diligence and hard work so much, how can these women embrace and justify this new form of mobility and work, especially in the era of social media and within the influencer industry? This question pushes me to consider possible tensions. How do followers and family back home perceive a woman who appears to be just having fun? Do these influencers feel pressure to constantly demonstrate that they are indeed working, learning, growing, hustling, even as they post, very relaxing photos beside the beach? Such cultural expectations from the backdrop of their self-representation should definitely be considered too. Speaking of that, today we are diving into Winter's journey, a case study of one influencer who moved from an intense corporate life to the dynamic world of digital nomadism. Winter's story illustrates the lived experience behind the trends and theories I've outlined. Through her, we can observe how abstract concepts like neoliberal feminism or platform labor play out in a personal narrative. Winter's post appeared on my Xiaohongshu feed probably 2 years ago now. In that post, which she had pinned to the top of her profile at the time, she was dressed in a business casual style, a tailor blazer, and the typical folded arms pose common in professional corporate shots to show confidence. The title read, "I quit my job to travel around the world, and now I've given a talk at Oxford." In the background, you could see a British-style room set up with classroom-style desks and chairs. When I clicked into the post, I saw more photos of her presenting in front of a projected screen with slides written in Chinese and sitting with other Chinese speakers at a roundtable discussion. Winter, which is definitely a pseudonym I chose for privacy, introduced herself as a founder, a former senior manager, and a representative of digital nomads at this event. When I checked her Xiaohongshu profile, she had already included speaker at Oxford in her bio. And this title has since appeared everywhere she shows up online, in interviews, podcasts, and videos. Another label she uses alongside this one was her previous profession, including the very specific names of her former big tech employers. Currently, she has over 100,000 followers on Xiaohongshu. Already, Winter was leveraging her credentials as part of her personal brand. By foregrounding her talk at Oxford and her ex-corporate titles, she signals to followers and definitely to sponsors that she's not just a drifter here. She's someone with elite cultural capital who chose a different path. This highlights how status markers from one's past life can be repackaged as assets in influencer entrepreneurship. After reviewing all her posts on Weibo, on Xiaohongshu last year, as a preliminary step in my digital ethnography, I identified 3 themes in Winter's content. This theme reviewed the narrative strategies she uses to construct her identity as a digital nomad influencer. Theme 1 is the contrast, as I said, between her previous corporate life and her current mobile digital nomadism. By repeatedly posting photos of her old staff ID and corporate office shots, Winter highlights the juxtaposition between her past and present life. Now she has built her own brand in outdoor spaces, embracing a lifestyle marked by natural environments and casual outfits. The difference here is very obvious, indicating it's not just about leaving a job. It's about embracing a whole new way of living and working. Her content constructs a before and after story, the constrained, suit-clad office workers versus this liberated 10 women with very little makeup working by the sea, by the ocean. This binary is a common aspirational script in digital nomad communities worldwide. Winter kind of taps into the global narrative of escape and reinvention, making it locally resonate for her Chinese audience. Theme 2 focuses more on the productivity and self-marketing in Winter's journey as a digital nomad influencer. This theme looks at how she marketizes herself. She frequently posts updates about meeting investors and potential brand sponsors. In related posts, she often closes with reflections on self-branding and marketing strategy, aimed at followers who dream of quitting their jobs and start something like Winter here. Much of the language she uses is steeped in this tech and startup jargon, which resonates strongly with audiences who share her background. Her background in brand operation and management underpins another layer of this content. She shares insights on building a personal IP, drawing heavily on her corporate experiences. In this theme of content, she leans more towards a polished but not purely corporate image, dressing stylishly and posing against urban backdrops, such as this shot you can see on the screen from London. Winter is effectively positioning herself as this global citizen, but also as this startup founder of her own personal brand. Winter also positions herself as a guide to the digital nomad lifestyle, sharing practical tips on co-working spaces across Asia and offering financial advice on living off passive income. These posts are usually paired with images of herself or other nomads working in Bali, lugging large backpacks or typing on laptops in large tropical settings, visually linking productivity with mobility and leisure. In doing so, Winter reinforces what Bowsy noted, the aesthetic of work in scenic locales. The photo of a laptop next to a coconut, like a drinking coconut, or a Zoom meeting by the infinity pool presents an idealized merger of work and play. It says, look, work doesn't tie me down. I can be productive anywhere. This aesthetic is central to digital nomad culture globally, but Winter localizes again for her followers. The theme 3, the final theme, which is very crucial to Winter's content, is the positive body image and the freedom to dress. Winter has consistently shared empowering messages about weight, body image, and exercise, such as, I haven't lost a single kilo, but I've kept running for 2 years. Winter also actively challenges stereotypes by highlighting race and gender in an impactful way. For example, she poses a rhetorical question. Isn't this kind of behavior from a Chinese woman a bit too much? She captioned this under a photo of her wearing activewear at an influencer event. You can see the photo with blue. Oh, they're both blue, like on the left of the slide here. So she's only wearing activewear at this influencer event, implicitly pushing back on the conservative notion that Chinese women should be modest or reserved. In another context, under her photo by the seaside on the right, she was in bikini, wearing a bikini, and she wrote, surely no one these days take swimming suits photos just to attract men, right? This might seem ordinary in Australia, where sports bras, bike shorts, and bikinis are common in everyday outfits or as like default beach wear. When you go out to the street, you can see people in this like every single day, especially now in summer. However, it's much less common in China, where usually more coverage and a modest style are expected, especially in social media posts. So another example will be if you see people are dressing in outfits which showing a bit of cleavage, they would just use like things to cover it up in the video. Yes, so this is like kind of like her very strong component of her content when showing her body and this bold outfits. In this theme, Winter questions societal expectations and norms, especially those dedicating how individuals, women, especially women, should look and act based on their gender. These statements, mostly phrased as rhetorical questions, I don't know if you catch that or not, like a lot of her titles was like framed as like a rhetorical question, very strong question, carry an affective voice that pushes back against gender norms and encourage embracing one's body and identity. Yet they also reflect this like tightrope she walks. She must appear liberated and confidently authentic, in line with this post-feminist body positivity discourse, but not so transgressive as to alienate her more traditional followers. This bikini post, for instance, positioned her as a modern cosmopolitan Chinese woman who asserts, I'm doing this only for me, for my pleasure, not for the male gaze. This performance of confidence is very empowering, but it's also very much a part of the influencer brand she's building. The authenticity itself becomes like a carefully managed output. However, throughout Winter's profile, I've been grappling with these apparent inconsistencies in her content. It's striking that narratives of well-being, self-growth, and anti-convention often weave together with elements of materialist success, where roles such as being a speaker at an elite university or financial gains become key labels signaling that I made it in digital nomadism and influencer entrepreneurship. In other words, the very markers of prestige she left behind resurface as proof of her credibility. This reflects a broader paradox in post-feminist entrepreneurial narratives. Success is built on an anti-established ethos, yet it must still be validated through that kind of certain established symbols like fame, money, institution, recognition. Additionally, I see staggered disclosure of personal challenges, such as financial strain and mental health issues. In more recent posts, Winter opens up about the tough moments she went through 2 years ago to convey her resilience. What struck me was that she had not previously posted anything about it, about her investment failures or mental health struggles back then. Instead, it was always positivity, happiness, a big smile, and high energy. This tactic may add a layer of reliability and authenticity to the influencer's persona, but it also raises questions about how much curation and selective representation are involved. Winter's retrospective candidateness can be read as a strategic authenticity move, revealing vulnerability after establishing her success. It has been claimed that sharing personal struggles can bolster audience trust, creating an authenticity effect while still maintaining a carefully controlled image. It requires meticulous actions for balance. Too much perfection and she'd seem unrelatable. Too much hardship and the fantasy collapse. Finally, let's not overlook the negotiation of gender norms, especially in the context of resisting and reproducing the Chinese women discourse. When Winter presents herself as resisting particular stereotypes and stigma, what kinds of message are being conveyed and how might they reinforce, complicate, or unsettle expectations of what a Chinese woman is imagined or expected to be or not to be? Her content exists in a double bind, right? On one hand, she's breaking the mold, challenging ideas that Chinese women must be timid or that they shouldn't prioritize their personal happiness. On the other hand, by becoming a model of the empowered Chinese woman, she may inadvertently set a new standard that only a very privileged few can achieve. Feminist scholars like Angela McRobbie warn that post-feminist media often adopts words like empowerment and choice, which convert it into individualistic language in ways that don't truly dismantle structural inequalities. In that case, we must ask, is Winter simply creating a new ideal of the modern Chinese women in digital nomadism and influencer entrepreneurship that demands exceptionalism, like quit your job, travel the world, but also successful and looking confident all the time? To replace this context, emerging research on Asia female digital nomads suggests that they face intersecting barriers of gender and race that Western nomads do not. For instance, a recent study in tourism research. So a lot of recent, I would say, digital nomads studies, they are situated in tourism research, found that Asian women's experience abroad are constrained by internalized racism, sexualized stereotypes, and the differentiate treatment they receive compared to their Western travelers. Winter's pointed question here, isn't this a bit too much for Chinese women, directly address those societal limits. It's a tongue-in-cheek acknowledgement that what is seen as bold individualism in a Western, or even not even bold at all, in a Western context, might read as improper or excessive and transgressive when done by a Chinese woman. By voicing it, she is both poking at the bias and also framing herself as someone who dares to cross the line. So, Winter's identity making is a complex dance, resisting certain norms while benefiting from others. This year, I plan to conduct both digital and in-person ethnography. I'm actually doing that right now to deepen this work. This will include large-scale online observation of influencers' content and narratives, comments on posts, discussions on Xiaohongshu and other platforms across other platforms, as well as media coverage and multimedia discourses such as podcasts, short videos, etc. I will also conduct interviews and informal conversations with these Chinese influencers to explore how they navigate new forms of mobility, their career aspirations, and their public-facing image. I aim to trace how their intersectional identities are perceived, understood, presented, and branded on social media. I'm also interested in their everyday routines, how they organize work and life, and how they create content as influence entrepreneurs and digital nomads. Methodologically, this multi-sided approach will allow me to capture both the self-representation online and behind-the-scenes realities that might not surface. By interviewing these influencers, I hope to hear their reflexive accounts of negotiating cultural expectations. For example, dealing with family back home or visa challenges abroad. And definitely the platform expectations, modulations, and kind of the governance from not only platforms, but also policies. In doing so, this project will contribute to a richer understanding of identity, mobility, and influencer culture in non-Western or transnational context. The focus on Chinese women answers reasons caused in research to address gendered and racial blind spots in the study of digital nomads. For identity, this study will shed light on these women's construct a sense of self that intertwine national identity, gender, and the cosmopolitan global citizen ideal. For mobility, it will explore what transnational movement means to individuals from a country where mobility is both highly desired, but also culturally or politically sensitive. Finally, this project has implications beyond academia. It touches on questions of aspirations and inequality. Are digital nomad influencers simply the latest chapter of neoliberal dream chasing, post-pandemic, selling a fantasy of freedom that most of their followers can't actually attain? Or do they signal new possibilities for women or other marginalized groups of people to redefine success on their own terms? I'll continue to observe and analyze these develops. Through this, I hope to provide a nuanced account of Chinese women, capturing not only the glossy surface of beautiful photos and videos, but also the backstage of negotiating identities and livelihood under platform capitalism. At last, this early stage research will inform our understanding of how identity is being reshaped by social media in ways that can both reinforce and challenge cultural norms, how mobility is leveraged as a personal escape and a commodifiable brand, and how platform labor, precarious and glorified, emerged in contexts beyond the dominant Western frame. More to come as the project unfolds. So thank you so much for your time and attention. I look forward to your feedback and questions. Thank you.